Holy God, we come before you now to seek your word, to seek your voice. Speak now to all of us. Speak through these humble words, that your message might be felt in our spirits. We pray in your Son's name, amen. It's one of those trips that I remember more in flashes than in great detail. It was a June trip taken through my seminary Eden just after the end of my second year in seminary. It's a trip with the organization Borderlinks, whose mission is to help educate people, including seminarians, about those who live on the U.S.-Mexico border near Tucson, Arizona, and those who cross there. It was a short trip, about 8 days, and yet it was filled with many learning experiences. Though, as I said, they remain mostly flashes. I remember the Border Patrol station where I had the chance to talk to members of the Border Patrol. I remember kids getting lunches in Nogales, Mexico, at a facility owned and operated by Borderlinks for that community. I remember meeting folk who were going to cross the border the next day. Not in Nogales, but at a place further south where they would board vans and drive up. I remember the border itself. Both the wall in Nogales, Mexico, and the barbed wire fence out in the middle of the desert. I remember the roosters that crowed in Mexico, their voices ringing through the hills, and alas, not just at sunset. Not good sleep those nights. But mostly, I remember the overnight stay with the host family in Nogales. On this trip, and apparently on all Borderlinks trips as much as they can, we had a host family so that we might get a sense of what it's like to live on the Mexican side of the border, so that we might have a better connection to those who were not Americans but Mexicans, even through the language barrier. We stayed for one night with these host families. We ate with them and tried to build a relationship. To make that possible, they worked hard to make sure every single small group had someone who spoke Spanish. Unfortunately, our person spoke only a little Spanish, and our host family spoke only a little English, so we didn't have long conversations, but we actually still built connection. We built connection through the music that we shared, even if we couldn't understand the words. We built connection through the gracious and delicious meal as we broke bread around one table together. And we share connections through the sharing of hospitality. Connections were formed, and yet it's that hospitality that keeps coming back to me. Because I slept like a baby that night. The home we were in, that our host families owned, had only 2 rooms. They were big rooms, but just 2 rooms. One was a living room with a kitchen attached to it, so that may have been 2 rooms itself if you want to count the kitchen separate, but there was no wall. It was just a long room. And then there was the bedroom. There was an outside bathroom, but it was outside the walls. You had to go outside to use it. And we slept that night in the bedroom, in the air-conditioned with the window unit bedroom of this host family. Well, they slept out in the living room kitchen on their couch and on sleeping bags on the floor. That night, I got to sleep on a very comfortable bed in a cool room, which, trust me, was extraordinarily welcome. It was June, after all, in Mexico. The AC was very nice. It was one of the most amazing examples of hospitality I've ever had the chance to receive. This morning, our gospel talked about hospitality, and we're going to talk about hospitality. And I just told the kids what it was, but you all are adults probably know the term anyway. It's when we welcome someone, when we work really hard so that they feel not just that they can come in, but they are welcome. We want them here. We want them in whatever space we're being hospitable in. We all have in our minds what that looks like. For me, it will always be that air-conditioned bedroom in Nogales, Mexico. For Jesus, at least in this passage, is being welcomed in the midst of hardship. This passage this morning is actually an addendum, really, to last week's passage. And if you think back to last week, and if you forgot, I'll remind you briefly here, it was when Jesus sends the disciples out. He sends them out, he says, as sheep among wolves. He sends them out, warning them that it's not going to be easy. That there will be people opposing them and standing up to them and trying to stop them. That the work they're called to do will face opposition. It's a dire warning here, smack dab in the middle of Matthew's Gospel, though probably adjusted at least for the post-Easter world in which Matthew was writing. But then this small little passage that happens immediately afterwards, that is almost an addendum to that passage, offers hope. It will be hard, Jesus says, but there will be those who welcome you, who will take you in, who will offer you that cup of water. This small passage is, I think, also a call to us. Again, mostly because it's written in that post-Easter world, as Matthew writes, some 30 to 40 years after the death of Jesus. Matthew is writing not just to people who were being persecuted and oppressed and opposed in the early church, but also to those people whom will welcome the disciples in. Matthew is writing to the church and saying, maybe you can't be the missionaries, but you can be those who offer them a cup of water. This passage is a word of hope, but also a call to action. A call to hospitality. A call to welcome Jesus. For he says that they welcome you in, they welcome me. When we welcome those whom Christ sends our way, we welcome Jesus himself. Now, of course, we don't have swarms of missionaries wandering around our streets here in Batesville, Indiana, or anywhere in the United States. So we have to welcome others. But the good news is, friends, God gives us plenty of people to welcome. People to welcome here in this church, people to welcome in our lives, people to welcome around the world. So I invite you just for a moment this morning to ponder what you would be willing to do to welcome others. What, like that family in Nogales, Mexico, some 14 years ago, would you give up to make somebody else feel welcome? And I want to state at the beginning, so I don't start any really serious worrying here in the sanctuary or online, that nothing I'm about to say is a suggestion that we have to do next week. They're merely questions about how far is our line of welcome. So for instance, can we imagine our worship services using more contemporary music for those who might need it? Or even African-American style gospel hymns, if a family or families come to our congregation and truly desire that as a way to nourish their souls. Can you imagine children at the communion table with all the messiness that implies as a way to welcome all to share the bread and the cup? Can we imagine dialogue sermons with one of you up here talking back with me at this moment and sharing conversation? Or perhaps, if no one wants to be up here, one in which I ask a question and the group gives answers to each other as a part of the sermon moment. Can we imagine it, especially if it were clear that a practice like that would help others feel more welcome in this space, our space? Can we imagine, as a community of faith, letting go of a few of our sacred cows, events or programs that we could allow to sunset, if we found that doing so or starting something new in their place would help others to feel more welcome? Could we reimagine our church calendar? Even if it meant letting go of whatever that cherished event is for you, that one that is your absolutely most favorite thing about being at this church, if we discovered that letting it go would help somebody else to feel welcome. I don't know that it would. You know, I didn't mention any events on here, because I don't have a hypothetical in my brain where letting go of this event means people come in more. The question is worth considering. If we found such a hypothetical, could we let go, even of cherished programmatic events, to be more welcoming and hospitable to those outside? It's not an easy question, friends. Can we extend hospitality and ideas and thoughts and perspectives? It was bemoaned, and with good reason, this weekend at the annual meeting, that the church hour is still the most segregated time in American life, as white churches and black churches and Latino churches gather, and rarely the twain shall meet. And as I said, the conference began an initiative to try and attack that work at the meeting this weekend. But what can we do? How can we work to be more welcoming to those who maybe don't look like us? One way, one hard way, honestly, might be to begin to allow ourselves space, to let others express their full emotions, even if it makes us uncomfortable. So, for instance, can we, as one of the panelists suggested this week at the annual meeting, make space for rage and grief and anger and pain in our African American brothers and sisters? Rage and grief and anger and pain for 400 years of systematic racism? Can we find ways to be able to hear it, even as mostly white folk in this room and mostly white folk online, without being defensive, without pushing back, simply allowing it to exist and watch over us and try and learn from it what we can about the places that we have simply not seen? I won't mince words. Of the things I suggested, that's probably the hardest one. It's easy to say. It's not so easy to do. I know. But it's one way that we could be hospitable to others who aren't in this room, both as a church community and as individuals living life out there. Hospitality is not easy, friends. I almost feel like the examples I've given don't quite express the challenge of it enough, but you know, the work of welcoming others is hard work. So let me end with a word of hope. I've offered lots of ideas here, and some of them are possible, some of them are rather far-fetched. I don't think we'll anytime soon be starting an African-American style gospel choir. I just don't think that any of us here have the ability to lead that style of music. I could be wrong, but probably not. But even when the work of hospitality seems too much, or too hard, or too impossible, Jesus offers us yet one more word of hope. All hospitality takes, he says, is a glass of water. For even one who gives a glass of water to one of these little ones will not lose their reward, he says. And here's what I think he means. All the work we do in the name of hospitality, all the work is important, and it builds something important. Whether it's the big stuff and the hard stuff, or the simple work we try to do every day. So maybe we can't adopt a whole new style of worship, and we probably shouldn't even try. But maybe we can always work to add songs to our repertoire, to add music to how we share our life together. Maybe we're not going to abandon all of our programs, and we definitely shouldn't try. But we can at least keep looking at them always with open eyes, how we can make them more inclusive, more welcoming, more hospitable, more extensions of the love and grace we see in God. Maybe we cannot fix systematic racism in one day or one sermon or one annual meeting resolution, but we can commit ourselves to listening even when it gets hard. And knowing that the hard work can lead to change, the hard work can lead to others feeling more welcome to talk to us yet even more. And bit by bit by bit, it changes ourselves and the world. Every action we take helps us and our community become more hospitable and welcoming. And so every action, even a small glass of water, counts. Now, that's not an excuse to stop trying to get better and better. It's not an excuse to keep trying to improve. But it is a gift of grace. Even the little things count. Even a small cup of water. As we strive to make all feel welcome, as we strive to live into the hospitality that Christ invites us into, we don't have to be perfect. We just have to keep at it. Day after day after day. We may never be able to match the gift of an air-conditioned bedroom in the desert. But friends, even a glass of water counts. For little things matter. Little things become big things in the workings of God. And by God's grace, we can find the ways to do both those big things and those little things. Thanks be to God.